buried. The first thing Emily felt was pressure. Heavy, crushing weight on her chest. She tried to move her arms, but they were pinned at her sides. The air was tight, suffocating. Her breath came out in short, panicked bursts, and she realized something horrifying. She was inside a box. A small one. The walls were inches from her face. Wooden. Rough. The smell of dirt filled her nostrils. The last thing she remembered was going in for a routine doctor's visit. She had felt dizzy in the waiting room, then nothing. And now, she was here. A choked sob bubbled up in her throat as she fought against the rising terror. She pushed against the wood, but it didn't budge. Panic clawed at her chest. No, no, no. This can't be happening. She screamed. Loud. Desperate. The sound was absorbed by the earth around her. She thrashed, kicked, pounded her fists against the wooden coffin. Her nails scraped the inside, splinters embedding themselves in her fingers. She didn't care. She had to get out. Then she stopped. Listened. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. Silence. Then, scratching. From above. Her breath hitched. Was it someone digging her up? The scratching grew louder, more frantic. Closer. It wasn't the sound of a shovel. It was something else. Something with claws. A muffled thump hit the top of the coffin. Then another. And then she heard the breathing. Heavy. What? Something was out there. Waiting. Emily pressed herself against the wooden surface, as if she could sink into it and disappear. Her mind raced. Was this a nightmare? A sick prank? Then a voice. Oh, whispering. Right above her. Almost time? Emily's body turned ice cold. It was not a voice she recognized. It wasn't a voice that sounded human. The air inside the coffin was growing thinner. Sweat dripped down her forehead. She couldn't breathe. Her vision blurred at the edges. Then, light. A crack above her face. Dirt shifted. Something, or someone, was opening the coffin. Emily gasped, sucking in a lungful of fresh air as she saw movement. Silhouettes. More than one. Then faces. Pale. Sunken. Eyes like hollow pits. Children. At least 5 of them peering down at her, their mouths stretched into eerie, unnatural smiles. The last thing she saw was their tiny hands reaching for her, dragging her out of the earth. And then, blackness. Emily woke up to the sound of sirens. Bright lights. Paramedics swarmed around her. She gasped for air, coughing violently. "You're okay, miss," one of them said, wrapping her in a blanket. "You were buried alive. But you're safe now." Emily's body trembled. She turned to the paramedic, voice hoarse. Who dug me up?" The man frowned. "What do you mean?" She swallowed hard. "The children. The ones who pulled me out." The paramedic's face went pale. "There was no one there when we found you." Emily's breath caught in her throat. She looked down at her dirt-covered hands. Tiny handprints. Imprinted all over her arms. The paramedic took a step back, shaking his head. He cleared his throat. "We received an anonymous call. A child's voice on the line, frantic, giving us exact coordinates to your location. By the time we got here, the ground above you had already been disturbed, like someone had started digging. But there was no one in sight. Just you." Emily's stomach twisted. The paramedic's radio crackled, and a garbled voice spoke through the static. It sounded distant, wrong, like a child speaking from the depths of an empty tunnel. "Almost time?" The paramedic yanked his radio from his belt, staring at it in horror. A cold wind rushed through the trees, and somewhere in the distance, a child's laughter echoed through the night. Emily's breath quickened. She wasn't sure if she had truly escaped. And then she saw them. Standing at the edge of the forest. Watching. The children. Days after Emily's rescue felt unreal. She was discharged from the hospital with only minor injuries, some dehydration, bruising, and a few scratches. But the trauma ran deeper. She barely slept, jolting awake at the slightest sound, certain she'd hear the whisper again, "Almost time." She tried telling the police about the children. About the tiny handprints. About the eerie voice on the radio. But they dismissed it as shock-induced hallucination. The only fact they couldn't explain was the anonymous call that led them to her. A child's voice, they said. Distorted, trembling. But no traceable number. Emily is back in her apartment, but it no longer felt safe. Shadows stretched too long in the corners. Whispers rustled through the vents at night. And then, things started happening. The first was the dirt. She woke up on the 3rd morning home and found her bed covered in it, clumps of soil and dried roots staining her sheets. She screamed, scrambled away, and checked the windows and doors. Locked. No signs of a break-in. The next night it was the scratching. Soft at first. like fingernails against wood. It came from under her bed. She lay frozen, covers pulled to her chin, barely breathing. Then a whisper, "Almost time?" She bolted from the bed, turned on every light, but found nothing. No footprints. No dirt. Just the overwhelming feeling that she wasn't alone. On the 5th night, she woke to find her phone ringing. An unknown number. Hands shaking, she answered. Static. Then a child's voice. "We never left." Emily dropped the phone. It clattered to the floor. The call ended. She wanted to leave to check into a hotel, but dread pinned her in place. If she ran, would they follow? The next day, she dug into the history of the land where she was buried. Hours of research led her to an old newspaper article. Local orphanage fire kills 5, bodies never found. Her stomach turned. The children. She knew what she had to do. Armed with a flashlight and trembling resolve, she returned to the site at night. The grave was still there, a fresh mound of disturbed earth. She knelt down, whispering, "What do you want?" Silence. Then the ground beneath her shifted. Hands burst from the dirt. Tiny, skeletal fingers wrapping around her wrists, pulling her down. She screamed, fought, but the whisper came again, louder, all around her. "It's time." The last thing she saw before darkness swallowed her was 5 pairs of hollow, sunken eyes. Emily was never seen again. Weeks later, another anonymous call came to the police. A child's voice. Urgent. Begging for help. Another grave was waiting to be found. And somewhere in the wind, a familiar laughter echoed through the night. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.